The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party has won the federal elections and is now all set to form Canada's next government. But it is not yet clear if they'll hold a majority in the Parliament. Now, the Liberal Party has clinched a new term in power after Mark Carney managed to convince the voters that his experience managing economic crises in the past has prepared him to confront the American President Donald Trump. And after the win, the newly elected Prime Minister has said that his country should never forget the lessons of the United States' betrayal. Now, Mark Carney has further told the cheering supporters in Ottawa that they will win this trade war. But he's warned of some pretty challenging days ahead, brought on by Donald Trump's tariffs and the repeated threats of Trump's annexation.
The system of open global trade anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons. The system of open...
The final results are still pending for Canada's 343-member parliament with 172 seats needed for a clear majority. The Liberals had managed to win a majority in 2015 but have governed in a minority setup since 2019. Now, Pierre Trudeau's Conservatives were eyeing for an election landslide earlier this year, but then they started trailing the Liberals just days ahead of voting. Now, the American President Donald Trump's tariffs and threats of annexing Canada stood as the central issue in these elections. Now, Donald Trump, in fact, inserted himself into the race early in the day with a social media post saying that Canada will face zero tariffs if it becomes the cherished 51st state of the United States. Now, Pierre Trudeau hit back firmly and said that President Trump stay out of our election. Mark Carney had weighed in saying that this is Canada and we decide what happens here. Remember, Mark Carney replaced Justin Trudeau, who was the focus of the opposition attacks about inflation, high immigration levels, and also an acute housing crisis that Canada has been grappling with for years. The 60-year-old former central banker had no prior political experience before running to become the Liberal leader earlier this year. He had billed himself as someone who knows how to negotiate and how to manage a crisis. Now, Trump's involvement not only has infuriated many Canadians, but has also put Pierre Trudeau and the Conservative Party on the back foot. Now, Mark Carney banged on his campaign on the elbows up slogan, urging the Canadians to raise their elbows and to stand strong against the Americans and articulate a path forward. Now, Carney also described the danger posed by Trump as an existential one, and he repeatedly stressed during his campaign that the American president wants to break them down so America can own Canada. Now, the Liberals asked the Canadians for a strong positive mandate to deal with President Trump and to build a new Canadian economy that works for everyone. This pitch appears to have resonated amongst the voters who've now pushed the Liberals back into the governance chair. But now both Mark Carney and the Canadians alike need to roll up their sleeves if they are to survive America's economic blows that are coming from Donald Trump. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what has, of course, happened in these Canadian elections, we're joined by Mr. Mike Buckley. He's joining us from London. Mr. Buckley is a senior journalist and also a political commentator. Mr. Buckley, this is an election that was being watched very closely. Give us a sense as to the role that Donald Trump has played, perhaps unwittingly, by making those remarks repeatedly that Canada should become the 51st state of the United States of America. Is that what has pushed Mark Carney to regain his chair as the Prime Minister?
Well, Trump has been instrumental in this election, and there's no doubt that had the election been held without Donald Trump being in office and without the attitude that he's had towards Canada, the right-wing party in Canada would have won. So the Liberal Party, Mark Carney's party, were incredibly unpopular last year. Then Donald Trump got elected and started threatening that he wanted to make Canada the 51st state of America, which obviously very greatly angered Canadian people who have no desire to become American. And because the right-wing candidate in the Canadian election was seen as being very close to Donald Trump politically, also a populist, also on the right, also an agitator, and somebody who was appealing to certain instincts in Canadian culture, that gave the Liberals the opportunity to come back. Another crucial factor was the resignation of the former Liberal Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who'd been Prime Minister for almost 10 years. He was incredibly unpopular. When he finally resigned at the end of last year, that gave the Liberal Party the opportunity to put a new popular leader, Mark Carney, in place, who then had the chance to win the election. Right. He won the election by being very clear that he is opposed to Donald Trump, opposed to Donald Trump's policies, opposed to the economic tariffs, the trade tariffs that Donald Trump has brought in, and opposed to any suggestion that Canada would become America's 51st state. So the forthrightness and the bullishness and the clarity of Mark Carney's opposition to Donald Trump and his presidency and his policies is what has enabled him to win this election and enabled him to govern Canada and enabled the Liberal Party to govern Canada for an unprecedented fourth term.
Interesting. Now, but, let's also look at, the other leader, the right-wing leader, Pierre Trudeau. He was campaigning on the issue of anti-immigration. As to how, under Justin Trudeau, the floodgates of immigrants had been opened onto Canada, and he wanted to reverse that. What do you think actually went wrong for Pierre Trudeau? Is it that Donald Trump came out of nowhere and probably Pierre Trudeau had not got the right narrative to deal with Donald Trump's version of what he saw Canada's future should be?
That's exactly right. So Mr. Poilievre, he is prepared for the political moment that just passed. So the political moment of last year was one in which Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister, was incredibly unpopular. One of the things people are angry about was high immigration in Canada, as indeed there's anger about that in many Western nations at the moment. And so Mr. Poilievre was capitalising on that anger to increase his popularity. And indeed, for much of last year, his party was 20% ahead of the Liberal Party in the polls. So everybody was expecting a right-wing party, Mr. Poilievre, to win. I think he had a 99% expectation when he looked at polls and booking sites saying that they thought that he was going to be Prime Minister and that the right-wing party would win. In the event, once Donald Trump came into office, the whole situation changed. And while Mr. Poilievre had been presenting himself as somebody who was close to Mr. Trump, to Donald Trump, and who would therefore have a policy towards the US and towards Donald Trump's administration that would be friendly and would be positive, of course, after Donald Trump got elected, was very rude towards Justin Trudeau, was very rude towards Canadians, and was threatening to take them over as a country. Of course, Mr. Poilievre, having set himself out as a friend of Donald Trump, was the last thing that the electorate wanted. So the plan that he put together very successfully last year to make himself popular and a likely Prime Minister all fell apart at the last moment, entirely because of, well, almost entirely because of Donald Trump, helped by Justin Trudeau resigning and helped by Mark Carney being a very credible candidate for Prime Minister.
Interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mike Buckley, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.